Does a higher fragrance concentration always mean that it's a better perfume? Let's talk about it in today's video. Hello, welcome back to Seldomly Often. I'm Daniel, today we're talking fragrances, and this is a practical review of the Extrait Absolu by Les Indémodables, Vanille Havane, Rose de Jamal, and Sirocco. These reviews are for fragrances I've already experienced with, multiple wears and many situations, and I meant to give you a general idea of what it feels to wear the fragrance. As per usual, I do a lot of research before buying fragrances, but I don't really like to go into details about notes and accords, as I don't think that they help the end user. I'd rather talk about the wear experience as a whole. Here we go again, let's give it another try. I already recorded this whole video, then I went on my computer, plugged in my card, I was super excited to start editing, and no audio. That was insanely disappointing, insanely annoying. I really hate repeating videos, but nonetheless, I'll try to keep the same enthusiasm that I had when I first filmed this. Today, as I mentioned, we're gonna be talking about the Extrait Absolu by Les Indémodables. These fragrances are absolutely incredible. Today's video will be a little bit different, well, because I'm talking about 3 fragrances rather than 1, or even the occasional double review that I do. But mainly it's gonna be different because I'm gonna be focusing on the wear experience of these fragrances compared to the EDP. I'm not gonna be necessarily mentioning or reviewing the EDP versions of these, but I really wanted to focus on how these Extrait Absolus are very different fragrance-wise and wear completely different from anything else. And I wanna touch upon the topic of concentrations in general and our expectations of concentrations. Obviously, we have the traditional EDT, EDP, Parfum, and Extrait de Parfum, but I feel that nowadays we all kind of expect every fragrance to be an Extrait de Parfum and be super projecting, super long lasting with amazing performance. The reality is that there's no free lunch and these fragrances truly depict what an extrait is all about. Before jumping into the fragrances themselves, I just want to touch upon the house of Les Indémodables and give my experience with them. I've sampled all of their offerings. I own a few of their offerings. It's an absolutely incredible house. It's one of my favorite houses on the market today. To me, it's basically a benchmark for what a modern niche house should aspire to be. They're so good, in fact, that they make a lot of modern brands look really mediocre by comparison. And for those not in the know, Les Indémodables is a French house with a very traditional approach, but they combine this very traditional perfumery with a little bit of nerdiness. And what do I mean by nerdiness? I mean that they focus on high quality ingredients while also showcasing their mastery and prowess in making perfumes. I really like the brand. They managed to put out these fragrances which are simple, or rather simple in concept, but very elaborate. They have so many layers of complexity, so much depth, and when you smell these fragrances, you really are wowed by the quality of perfumery that they showcase. It's absolutely insane because the more you wear the fragrances, the more you start discovering fine nuances in these perfumes. It's insane. I love the house so much. They're so easy to approach, yet they have so much depth. And I already talked about this, maybe in a frag talk, maybe in another review, but the perfect piece of art should have endless levels of complexity, endless levels of approachability. And Les Indémodables really manages to pull this off because someone who is not into perfumes will be able to enjoy these fragrances because they do smell absolutely incredible and amazing, and they do paint that very relatable picture. But at the same time, the perfume enthusiast, the fragrance lover will get a kick out of the brand because the fragrances showcase so much mastery, so much depth, so many layers to uncover. Incredible brand. A lot of the high quality output of the brand is definitely due to the creative vision of the couple leading it, Valerie and her husband, but it's also definitely due to the perfumer they employ. Antoine Lee has basically become the de facto perfumer for the brand. He's basically the in-house perfumer for Les Indémodables. He also works on a ton of other stuff. He's a creative perfumer, which really combines, again, this traditional approach with such a creative vision. I love his work. He's basically becoming very quickly one of my favorite perfumers ever. And he is responsible for making the EDP versions of Vanille Havane, Sirocco, and Rose de Jamal, and also the Extrait Absolu of the same fragrances. They're really good. They're some of the best from the brand. But back to these fragrances, back to the topic at hand. What actually are these products? Well, as I said before, these are highly concentrated extract de parfum. They're basically high oil concentrations of their EDP counterparts. And by the way, the EDPs by Les Indémodables are concentrated at 20%, at least these are, and these extraits are concentrated at 40%. That being said, that's not really the only difference between these and the EDPs. The main difference, and in my opinion, the thing that affects the wear experience the most for these, is that these are diluted in a carrier oil, in a neutral oil. So it's basically oil in oil. The EDPs are, as usual, diluted in ethanol, and that makes a massive difference in wear experience, a massive difference in scent profile. Well, actually, not necessarily scent profile, because these smell remarkably similar to the EDP counterparts, but it's a different way to perceive the scent profile. It's a very, very interesting experience. I do feel that these products overall are more aimed at the fragrance enthusiast, at the more nerdy side of this community, because you have to understand what these are to really appreciate them. They wear very, very differently, and the average user might even be heavily disappointed by these. But we're gonna talk about the wear experience and scent profiles after we cover the presentation. When talking presentation, Les Indémodables has this simple, modern, minimalistic approach that I really dig. The eau de parfum bottles, you've probably seen them already. They're very utilitarian, very function-based. I like them. They're high quality. The glass is super transparent. Everything feels really, really good. Yet they have this stark, pragmatic look to them, which really matches their brand identity in general. I do feel that their products look cohesive, but they are indeed expensive. And for this level of luxury, you would expect a little bit more refinement in all areas. I'm mainly talking about the caps, which are plastic. They feel a little bit cheap, they feel hollow, but overall, I really can't complain. These are some of my favorite fragrances ever. And when it comes to these extraits, a lot of the presentation characteristics from the EDP carry over. These feel high quality, they feel high end, they just feel super well made. These are small, they come in 10 or 12.5 ml, we'll get to that in a sec, but they do feel pretty hefty, they really feel good in hand. By the way, I forgot to mention that these fragrances are roll-ons, they're not spray-ons. You would not be able to spray a pure oil like that, not easily enough. These are basically roll-ons, you unscrew the cap, you get a little roller ball, and you apply the fragrance basically by rolling it on, kind of like a lipstick or lip gloss. It works surprisingly well. You just have to know exactly what you're getting into, because this application method and this type of perfumery really affects the wear experience, as I mentioned before, and as we're going to talk about later. I want to briefly touch upon what I said before, that these come in 10 and 12.5 ml. Actually, if you go on the website today, they're all in 12.5 ml, but my vial of Vanille Havane is actually a 10 ml. And Vanille Havane was the first one to come out, even before these two. And by the way, Sirocco and Rose de Jamal came out this year, so they're very, very new products, and I ordered them right away. I'll get to why in a sec. But my vial of Vanille Havane, I got secondhand on my local marketplace, and given the fact that this is a very specific niche product, I managed to negotiate the price, which was already low, even lower, basically making it a must buy. I was so excited to try this, and when I finally got it, I was so happy that I immediately ordered the other two. Now, when I placed my order for the other two, I wasn't aware of the difference in mLs. This one here was a 10 ml. These ones were a 12.5 ml, so I was super worried of having vials of different sizes. I'm a very OCD person when it comes to this stuff. I'm very, very visual, and I was so worried of having vials that would look slightly different on the shelf. Turns out that the size of the vials is exactly the same, despite having a different declared amount. It's a very interesting thing, because I can't pinpoint any difference in the construction of the vial itself. One says 10 ml, the other one says 12.5 ml. It's a mystery to me. My only explanation being is that the original vial actually fit 12.5 ml, but they decided to round it off to 10 just because it was a more even number, I guess. And then they decided to revert to 12.5 because it was actually more and was easier to sell. I have no idea. Going back to the presentation of these vials, and by the way, this one here is Rose de Jamal, you can immediately tell that the liquid in here is a little bit darker. This is obviously due to the higher concentration. Interestingly enough, this is mostly apparent on Rose de Jamal and Sirocco. The Vanille Havane is kind of the same color. Very, very strange. Anyway, the cap is a screw-on, as I said before. It's plastic, but it feels very, very solid. It actually beats out the EDP, so no complaints there. What I will complain about, and this is actually a real issue which affects functionality, is the quality control on the rollerball applicators. For whatever reason, my vial of Rose de Jamal has an incredibly difficult time spreading oil. It barely spreads any. It's super annoying. It's a real bummer because I can't get a consistent spread. On the other hand, I have my vial of Sirocco, which spreads way too much oil, making the application super messy and really unpredictable. My Vanille Havane vial is actually the sweet spot in the middle. I was very, very happy with that. This is such a disappointment. It's such a bummer because it really affects, as I said before, the functionality of these things. If you can't really apply it well, you will get a worse performance, you will get a worse wear experience. And hey, maybe I wasn't lucky, shit happens, that's absolutely fine, but I actually do recall the unboxing by Rich Mitch in which he was also having inconsistent application from his vials. So maybe there is something to this. The roll-on application is a very finicky, very delicate thing. It's not my favorite, I get it why they used it, but it's a huge turnoff for a lot of people. Closing off the presentation, trying to keep it short, realizing that these are very simple roll-on vials, I just want to mention the price. These are priced officially at 98 euros, which is significantly less than the EDP. Obviously, the price per ml is actually higher. In here, you get 12.5 mLs. In the EDP, you get 50. And the EDP, by the way, runs for 220 euros. These are pretty much impossible to find at discounters. Les Indémodables has very poor distribution, or rather, I think they intentionally have a very tight distribution to really control what goes where. Anyway, the EDPs are already very difficult to get at discounters. Don't expect to find the Extraits anytime soon at discounters. These are very, very niche products. Overall, quality control issues aside, for 98 euros, I actually feel that these offer pretty decent value. They smell absolutely incredible, very, very rich, very sophisticated, so luxurious, refined to the nth degree, and actually going through 10 mLs of this will prove very, very difficult. Surprisingly enough, before getting the other two, and after discovering that my vial was 10 mLs compared to the new 12.5, I was basically aiming to finish this or aiming to sell it off, so I wore a crap ton of this on and I barely put any visible dent in this. It's very, very potent stuff. You don't need much of it to really smell it, and it lasts a long, long time. By the way, I've been wearing these a lot these days, even at the office. They wear exceptionally well. We're going to talk about that later because they have a very specific wear experience. All right, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this video. Let's talk about the scent profile and wear experience for these Extraits Absolus by Les Indémodables, Vanille Havane, Rose de Jamal, and Oranger Sirocco. For simplicity, I'll be covering the scent profiles individually, separately. Then I'll reunite these fragrances and talk about the wear experiences in general because they are matching in that regard. All right, starting off with Vanille Havane Extrait Absolu. This one here is definitely the most popular of the three. Vanille Havane in general is easily the more popular fragrance from the brand of Les Indémodables, so much so that it got 2 flankers before any other fragrance even got a variant. It's an incredible fragrance. It deserves all the hype and more. It's absolutely beautiful. I can barely fault the scent profile. I've talked about the EDP version ad nauseum. I featured it pretty much everywhere. It even made my top fragrances for the winter months. It's an incredible fragrance that really manages to balance the sweet notes and the supporting notes, which are tobacco, booze, and cacao. It has so much richness, so much density, so much to uncover. And I say adult gourmand, not necessarily for the notes, not because of the imagery that the thing evokes, because it does bring you to this lounge area, which is dimly lit, a lot of leather sofas, a lot of smoke in the air. There's a lot of booze, there's a lot of cigars, really, really beautiful stuff. It's not because of that, but it's because it really balances that sweetness. This is definitely not one of your typical modern sweet bombs, full of synthetics, full of chemicals that are completely overwhelming. I'm very, very sensitive to vanilla. I'm very, very sensitive to sweetness, but this one here hits on all fronts. It's absolutely incredible. I love wearing it. It brings me so much joy. It has this comforting feeling, which almost feels like a warm blanket on a cold night. It's one of the best ways to end the day. It's so relaxing, so beautiful. And again, it's so rich. I really want to underline this aspect, and this is true for both the EDP version and the Extrait Absolu. Going to the scent profile, actually, the Extrait Absolu is very, very close to the EDP. So if you're familiar with that, there's a lot to love here. It's similar, but it's a little bit denser. It's not necessarily more bassy, it's not lower in the tone range, it's just slow moving. It feels viscous. This will be a common theme throughout these scent profiles, by the way. Maybe the slow moving aspect is what allows you to mentally zoom in on the scent and really pick it apart. Everything is moving slower and transitioning slower. It's kind of like looking at slow motion footage where you can really pick out every detail. This is absolutely incredible. When you put this on, you are immediately transported into this dense cloud of detail. Resolution will be one of the words that I'll be repeating throughout this video because it's all about the detail, it's all about the resolution, it's all about the richness in layers. Interestingly enough, one of the major differences in scent profile from this to the EDP is the boozy note. In the EDP, the boozy note is sharp and it transitions fast. It really evaporates fast. On this, the boozy note really permeates the whole wear experience. It's beautiful. I love that boozy note. It smells so realistic. It smells like a whiskey, like a bourbon, like a cognac, really embedded with these spices. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. I actually really do enjoy the lengthiness of that boozy note specifically. All right, on to Rose de Jamal. This one here is very, very interesting. This is probably the one that diverges the most from the EDP. It does smell similar, it has a similar vibe, but it does darken up a lot. And again, when I say darken, I don't necessarily mean it goes down in tone range. I say that it feels more dense, more viscous. And if you're not familiar with the scent profile for Rose de Jamal, let me just try to summarize the EDP version. Rose de Jamal is one of the more beautiful, fresh rose fragrances on the market. It's very refreshing, very dewy, very energizing. It sits high in the tone range. It's absolutely glorious. It's a unisex, masculine-leaning rose. There's a little bit of a green metallic aspect, which is probably responsible for depicting the rose stem, the rose thorns. It has a little bit of a prickliness. It has a little bit of an edginess. It's absolutely incredible. The longevity of Rose de Jamal is actually not that great. It's a very fleeting scent. And I do feel that that is actually one of the more beautiful parts of it. You throw it on, you're met with this incredible rose, which is so ghastly. It just goes away so fast, leaving you wanting more. It's definitely one of those fragrances that you need to reapply. Now, the Extrait version takes that same concept, but it makes it much more realistic, and it really zooms in on the rose aspect, on the petal aspect. It really goes away with a lot of the green metallicness. This is basically the purest form of a rose that I've ever smelled. It's so insanely realistic. It's so realistic, in fact, that if you were to put this under my nose with me being blindfolded, I'd probably tell you that I'm smelling a real rose. It's absolutely incredible. There's like so much detail in this depiction of a rose, so hyper-realistic. It's like you're looking at this rose with a microscope. You can really pick up on the velvety texture of the petals, on the softness, on the juiciness. It's so amazing. There's so many details. The rose in this goes so beyond being a rose note. It feels like it has sub-notes itself. It feels like the note of rose can be spread on its own tone range. It feels like it can be unpacked into its own thing. Absolutely incredible stuff. Unfortunately, as I said before, you lose a lot of the green metallicness, which gave the rose a little bit of an edge. You lose a lot of the freshness, you lose a lot of the dewiness. This is basically pure rose, but what a depiction of a rose it is. This is absolutely magnificent. It would make for incredible layering. Oh, by the way, speaking of layering, these fragrances would layer extremely well with the EDP counterparts. It would be basically like the ultimate layering solution. It would be a very, very expensive wear. It would be a very expensive wear per ml, but it would be so worth it. And by the way, I tried it with both Rose de Jamal and Vanille Havane, and it's mind-boggling. Last but not least, and I realize that I'm trying to be a little bit quick here talking about these scent profiles, let's cover Oranger Sirocco Extrait Absolu. Now, when it comes to the EDP, I don't have the bottle. It was actually the fragrance that impressed me the least from the Discovery set. I really did enjoy the vial. I went through the whole sample, but I'm not necessarily into getting a bottle. I have a lot of other orange and orange blossom fragrances. This one here is definitely super well made. It's definitely Les Indémodables style, but it wasn't wow-inducing enough for me to go out and purchase a bottle. When I got this, I was the least excited about this, but when I smelled it, I was blown away. This is also kind of different to Oranger Sirocco EDP, not necessarily scent profile-wise, but in the way the fragrance conveys a picture, in the way it showcases a mood. Now, the original fragrance, it does a really good job at depicting this orange grove off the coast of the Mediterranean, probably in Tunisia, Algeria, somewhere around North Africa. And there's a lot of spice in there. The scent itself is very effervescent, it's very refreshing. You smell the oranges, you smell the cinnamon, you smell all the high quality components, but the scent is very uplifting, it has this freshness, it has this airiness to it. This one here goes back to that viscous density, and this feels more like a syrupy extrait of that scent. And I mean syrupy in the literal sense. When I smell this, my God, it smells good. I'm picturing this honey-like consistency with orange peels floating around, with a little bit of cinnamon sticks floating around, and everything is just being poured in slow motion. You can see bubbles trapped in this honey-like consistency, very, very dense, very viscous. And this whole thing almost feels like molten gold. In a similar way to Vanille Havane, this Extrait version of Oranger Sirocco has a little bit of a gourmand aspect, but these fragrances do not come across as edible whatsoever, or rather, they come across as high concentrations of something that should be edible. Specifically, Oranger Sirocco kind of reminds me of those syrups that are used to make very high quality sodas, like the concentrated versions of that. If you think about something like a soda stream, you get those capsules with syrups that you basically mix in to create the actual soda. This smells like that. It has the same viscous consistency. And I'm picturing this incredibly viscous, almost molasses-like liquid being poured, kind of resembling honey. And for whatever reason, I'm also getting the imagery of gold. And not because of the metallic sheen, but mostly because of the opulence and of the regalness of the scent. It smells absolutely incredible. And maybe the soda aspect, that cola vibe that I'm getting, is a combination of the orange and the cinnamon. And cinnamon is usually used to portray a cola accord, or it's a big part of a cola accord. This is really, really great. I like this a lot more than the EDP. The EDP had this airiness, which I do appreciate, but it wasn't unique. This smells very, very unique. It smells like the concentration of an oil. It smells like the purest form of the oil within the oranges. The cinnamon is giving this a lot of body, a lot of roundness. It's absolutely glorious. Wow, I'm so impressed by Oranger Sirocco. And by the way, this one here is definitely the most subtle, the most timid when worn on skin. Maybe my skin is eating up the acidity from the orange, but when put on skin, this one here is the one that projects the least. And none of them project a lot. They all have very, very good longevity though. Speaking of longevity, let's transition into the wear experience, because this is where these scents align. They wear in such a specific way. They're so different from their EDP counterparts and pretty much different from any other fragrance that I've tried, which is not an attar. Hint, hint, they wear like an attar. But before talking about the wear experience, I just want to open that conversation, that massive door, which is a conversation about fragrance concentrations. We're all very, very familiar with terms like eau de toilette, eau de parfum, parfum, and extrait de parfum. The reality, though, is that we're just kind of skewed. The modern fragrance space is full of extraits, basically brands that only feature extraits, but these extraits project a ton, they last a super long time, and they don't really represent what an extrait is. There's a reason why people and brands would choose a concentration for a very specific use. The EDT and the colognes being very, very fresh, very evaporative, very effervescent, and the denser concentrations being a little bit more stable, a little bit more predictable, slower moving, and just overall less evaporating. And traditionally moving down to extraits or even to attars, you would be trading off projection for stability and longevity. The stability part is very, very important because the scents, due to their high oil concentration, move slowly. They have this viscous quality that these extraits really feature. That being said, in the modern fragrance space, our expectations are a little bit skewed. The customer is expecting performance, longevity, high quality, and value. In the eyes of the customer, the extraits offer the best quality, the best bang for buck, because maybe you need to spray less to perform the same. EDTs are seen as the cheaper version, and that's so false, it's so wrong. And you see brands nowadays featuring a whole lineup of extraits, basically throwing out the meaning of the word entirely. All the fragrances are performing massively with huge projection, huge longevity, and it doesn't really work like that. Yes, the fragrances might have high concentrate, but a massive part of that concentrate is basically aroma chemicals, boosting compounds. It's not true fragrance oils. In the case of Les Indémodables, their extraits feel like extraits. It feels very, very dense. It feels rich. It's a similar thing for Profumo Roma. Their fragrances feel really dense. They feel stable. They don't really move much. They don't really project much, but that's what a true extrait is. And hey, I'm definitely not here to bash the modern interpretation of the word extrait. I totally get it. I totally get what the customer wants, but it just makes this whole categorization kind of useless. EDT, EDP, parfum, extrait, it means basically nothing. You need to evaluate each fragrance individually. Going back to Les Indémodables, these wear like true extraits. They project very little, they're incredibly long lasting, and they're very, very stable. So sorry for the detour, but I really thought that needed to be pointed out. Let's go back to the wear experience of Les Indémodables Extraits Absolu. As I said before, these wear like true extraits. They're very, very viscous. They're very, very stable, very, very slow moving. They're so slow moving, in fact, that they basically have zero transition top to bottom. They don't really evolve at all. What you get in the start is what you get in the end. They last a surprising amount of time. They're very, very good, but they have this intimate wear experience. This is the thing that is very apparent. If you buy these and wear these expecting to get a lot of projection, you will be disappointed. If you're expecting the highest quality of perfumery that everyone around you will notice, you will be disappointed. These are basically for the nerdy customer that really wants to dive into the details, that really wants to analyze all of the facets that these beautiful fragrances have to offer. And this whole massive wear experience difference, as I mentioned in my introduction, all comes down to the fact that these are diluted in oil rather than ethanol. Ethanol has a very evaporative property. It really makes the fragrances push into the air, push into the atmosphere, push off you, and give you that projection. These are diluted in neutral oil. As I said before, it's basically oil in oil. And when you put them on, they smell very, very contained. These smell insanely high quality, very, very concentrated and pure, but the lack of ethanol basically means zero projection. On the flip side, the oil dilution means a lot of smoothness and a lot of resolution. These are so detailed, it feels like you can zoom into them infinitely. It's absolutely incredible. It's almost like looking at something through a water drop. If you've ever seen a water drop like on a plant or even on your skin, you basically can pick up on the detail beneath the water drop at like a 10 times magnification or even more. The oily aspect in this gives this kind of effect. It feels like you can look at them under a microscope and still pick up layers, still pick up additional details. They are absolutely incredible. Every time you wear them, they emerge in different facets. They really react to temperature. They really react to humidity. They're so incredibly stable yet transitioning, or rather, they're not necessarily transitioning, but they're adaptable and evolve to various wear situations. They're so beautiful, so rich, so sumptuous. So how do you fight the low projection on these? How do you wear these and still enjoy the experience and still get a great wear? Some may say to wear these on pulse points because apparently pulse points are a little bit warmer and they help the projection. That's a myth. The body is incredibly stable and the pulse points are basically the same temperature as other parts of the body. The way to wear this is actually put it next to your nose. I wear these specifically putting a couple circles behind my ear like this on my neck. And that basically guarantees good projection for 16 hours or the whole day. I keep smelling these. I keep getting whiffs and wafts of these throughout the day as I move about. It's a very, very intimate experience. As I said before, do not wear these expecting other people to smell them. People will only smell them if they lean in for a hug or a kiss. That's pretty much it. That's just the reality of the fact. But what you get, the trade-off, is that you get this immense density, immense pleasurable experience, which is never changing, which is incredibly stable. And to talk about my experience in a little bit more of a relatable way, I would say that the projection for these is about 2 inches, maybe 5-6 centimeters. It's very, very contained, but what a projection it is. It smells, it feels shiny and oily. It doesn't feel like a fog or a cloud or a dust or anything like that. It's incredibly unique. When you get your nose within the projection range, you are immersed in this microscopic world full of details, full of resolution, full of notes and nuances that you've never picked up before. Smelling these for the first time feels like putting on for the first time a super high-end pair of headphones. I'm into hi-fi. I've worn expensive headphones, and the first time you sample something like that, you are mind blown because you start listening to music like you never listened to it before. This is a very similar experience. I'm not saying that these are for everyone, and I would definitely not recommend these to everyone. They are a very niche product with a lot of compromises, a lot of drawbacks. But if you're willing to accept those, you're into for something really, really special. It's a little difficult to talk practicalities in these multi-reviews, especially this video, because it's so centered on this very particular wear experience, but I'll try to touch upon it nonetheless. The longevity is absolutely insane. You get easy 12, maybe 16 hours of wear. They're very, very long lasting. They tend to dry up so slowly. You're basically guaranteed a full days of wear. Projection wise, they are incredibly low. As I said before, You will be the one noticing them. It's a very, very intimate experience. These are not to share, or rather, it's not like they can't be shared. You just have to wear them together, or someone has to be very, very close to you. These are more for the fragrance aficionado that really wants to experiment with high-end smells in a more intimate level. Surprisingly enough, when it comes to versatility in use cases, this very low projection means that these are quite versatile because they will not offend anyone. You can pretty much wear these in every situation possible, day to night, casual to elegant. You can have them clash with whatever situation you want. They will never really clash because, again, it's a very intimate experience. That being said, when it comes to versatility, I would still definitely take into account the mood these things convey. For example, Vanille Havane is very, very cozy, very relaxing, very evening-like. This is definitely not a day starter. It's not one of those scents that you wear during the day to do stuff. On the other hand, Sirocco and Rose de Jamal are much more flexible. These can be worn in pretty much every situation, and due to their density, they go very, very well in the evening as well. None of these fragrances really have a fresh component. They're just very, very dense. They're just very calm and relaxing. They're very neutral in this sense. You can definitely wear these at the gym. They actually react surprisingly well with a little bit more temperature, a little bit more skin temperature at that, but they don't really fit the high activity sort of mood. They're just not for that. Other than that, the world is your oyster. You can do what you please. They're so likable, so wearable. You can easily push them into the background. They're so supremely well designed. When it comes to demographics, these are all absolutely 100% unisex. Maybe Vanille Havane could be seen as a little bit more edgy and maybe more masculine, but not really. These are very abstract. They're very simple concepts, very easy to interpret according to your needs and personality. They're very, very flexible. Age-wise, I wouldn't necessarily see younger people wearing these because, again, they're not your typical fragrance. They wear in a completely different manner, and you need to know what you're getting into. At Tars, young people, not so much. Young people want a lot of projection. They want to fill rooms. These just don't, no matter how much you apply. When it comes to imagery and narration, Les Indémodables is a little bit of a mixed bag. These scents are very, very simple in concept, which in return makes them very easy to like, very easy to understand and to adapt. They're so easy to interpret. You can make of them whatever you want. You can place them in your context for your personality, and they will merge perfectly. On the flip side, they don't really translate into deep narration. They don't really have a lot of storytelling. They just convey this simple image. In the case of Rose de Jamal, you basically get the most realistic picture of a rose ever. In the case of Vanille Havane, you get transported into this lounge, into this club. There's a little bit of smokiness, a little bit of booze, but again, there's not much detail. It's up for you to fill in the gaps. In the case of Sirocco, I'm picturing this syrup, slow-moving syrup that is, and I'm not getting much of the airiness, I'm not getting much of the freshness, I'm not being transported to this coastline with these oranges. It's just not that. It's just a slow moving syrup, which is super rich, very, very opulent. Again, very simple images, very easy to interpret, but not that deep in the narration department. These make for very, very good daily wears. They're easy to push into the background. They're almost signature scent worthy. Super great stuff, very beautiful, so well made, so well balanced. I guess this video has gone long enough. Let's dive into my conclusions and recommendations. First of all, these scents are absolutely epic. They're absolutely amazing. I'm so happy I have them. I was a little bit reluctant, mainly because of the format, mainly because of the oil roll-on application method, which is definitely not my favorite. But after smelling these, after wearing these multiple times in different situations, I'm completely in love. The general level of quality, the level of depth and complexity that these offer is absolutely second to none. I would still not recommend these to the general public. If you're the average Joe and you want high quality perfume, get yourself the EDP, you will not be sorry. These are for the person, paradoxically, that has the EDP, because if you have the EDP, you will be able to appreciate these fine nuances even more, and actually, you will be tempted to layer these, because as I mentioned before, these make for killer layer combinations. These are very expensive. They have a high cost per ml, and they become even more expensive if you go down the rabbit hole of layering. It's crazy stuff, but actually, I think that they're kind of worth it. These to me represent the highest end of perfumery, the highest craftsmanship of perfumery, just the highest quality in general. And yes, we live in a world of diminishing returns, and going up this scale, you have compromises, but you do get a little bit of a return. If you're that kind of person that can appreciate the fine nuances, and if you're willing to deal with the compromised nature of these products, you're in for a very, very good time. If you like this type of content, if you like my approach to video, feel free to subscribe. It always helps the channel and it's massively appreciated. If you want to interact with me, leave a comment, suggestion, opinion, or anything else down below. I always reply and I always keep the conversation open. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for your time. It's never taken for granted. Many more fun reviews coming up, many more fun products to showcase. I'm very, very excited. See you in the next one and cheers.